And welcome back once again alongside Jason and Dara. I am Jay Elson, and this is another Varsity Sports Web Extra. Sometimes, Jason, we just don't have enough time to get everything into that little 30-minute window on Wednesday nights, and certainly that's the case come state tournament time, which is why we're going to spend a little extra time previewing the South Dakota State boys basketball tournament.
So many good teams to talk about, and we are so limited covering 2 states in our show, so this will be fun.
Well, we got 3 tournaments to cover here, and we don't want to burn up too much of anybody's time, so let's get to it. We're going to start in Class AA. The Denny Sanford Premier Center, the big building in Sioux Falls, getting the first chance to host a state boys basketball tournament, first state tournament of any kind for that matter. And, it gets underway on Thursday. The top seed, Sioux Falls, Washington. The Warriors have been the #1 team, let's face it, all season long in South Dakota AA boys basketball. And now they're just looking to prove it with 3 wins and trying to cut down those nets on Saturday night.
Just those 2 losses on the year, both those losses coming to Minnesota teams. Took that #1 spot the first time they played against Lincoln. Of course, that was a pretty close game. I mean, just a 2-possession game. The second time, same thing, a very close game at the end. And then they beat them a 3rd time in the districts. Every time that they've played Lincoln, it's been a good game right up until the end. But every time Washington's won, and I got to give them credit. Their low post game is the reason I think that happens. And when their guards step up, they are really hard to beat. But when you got Cole Benson and Dangu, 2 of the best post players in the state, going at it, playing together so well, and then Sam Sagano's feeding him the ball, and the way that Carter Keller stepped up his game and Ty Smith, I mean, they are such a formidable team right now. Tough task to play against the Warriors. Yeah,
Washington opens up the tournament nude on Thursday against Huron. The 4-5 matchup that day is between Aberdeen Central and Rapid City Stevens. Aberdeen Central was red hot in the middle part of the season, stumbled a little bit down the stretch, but they come in as a #4 team and a dangerous one at that.
They are dangerous. This is a team that won 4 games last year, and with most of the same players have gone 19-4 this year, so already have had a great season for Coach Brent Norberg and company. But this team is big, and they've got a lot of guys they can go to. Anthony Bachmeyer, Jacob Gehring, Logan DeGrand, all double-digit scorers. They're consistent. They've got a tough matchup, though, I have to say, in Rapid City Stevens. Probably the most Jekyll and Hyde team we've seen in the tournament.
That's the perfect term for them, yeah.
You don't know what you're going to get on a daily basis. They've beaten some very good teams this year, including Aberdeen Central earlier in the season, and taking out Lincoln, the #2 team at the time, on the road. But they can also lose on a moment's notice. Well, they got hot in the districts, and they're going to ride who might be the best player in the state, Sam McLeod, a 20-10 guy with sophomore Mason Archambault feeding him the ball. 2 very dynamic talents, and they could do anything. They could get blown out the first round. They could make it all the way to the finals.
The evening session tips off 6 o'clock Thursday night with the 2nd seed, Sioux Falls Lincoln, and Watertown. Watertown is one of those teams that's playing its best ball at the end. That's where everybody wants to be this time of year.
A couple of big wins down the stretch for them, beating Aberdeen Central. At the time, Aberdeen was #2 in the state, and taking out Roosevelt to find their way to get to state. And they've done that with, again, a nice balanced team, but Nate Davis has really picked up his game leading the way. And they've got a tough matchup, though, against Sioux Falls Lincoln, a team that was #1 at the preseason. People forget that, but they are, talent-wise, one of the best in the state. And when they get their shooting we know that they can get from their guards with Caleb Johnson and company and Tate Lindsay, I mean, they could take down somebody if they get hot, because we know that Addison Park and Malik Dunn are forces on the blocks.
The quarterfinal nightcap on Thursday night, O'Gorman and Pierre in the 3-6 matchup.
Yeah, O'Gorman has had to fight injuries all season long, but luckily they play about 12 players, and they can rotate a lot of guys in there. None better than what Braxton Elliott has done. 15 points per game. Davis Cowan has come, and he's probably one of the most underrated shooters in the state, but they've had a problem missing Ben Lauer, their big guy, for the last 3 games. We'll see if he's able to play in these tournament games. And a tough draw for them with Pierre, a team, again, with a high ceiling, and they've had some low points this season as well. But we're talking about a team with 5 players who average more than 9 points per game. You do not know who's going to get the ball for Pierre and do the job, but we do know that Brevin Kaiser can go off at any moment.
Now, we talked about at the beginning of this just how new the Denny Sanford Premier Center is. Obviously, new building, a lot of bells and whistles, things that nobody, as far as the state tournament is concerned, has seen before. But there are a handful of these teams that had the opportunity to play in this building. Do you see an advantage for them going forward?
You have to. I mean, you look at these high school games that were played there. Every team shot well below their season field goal percentage, especially in the first half of the game. Now, was that nerves? Was that playing in an empty crowd? Was it playing in a new building? you know, some of these teams are more used to playing in bigger venues. Look at Rapid City Stevens. They've played, you know, games in the Corn Palace, at the Civic Center, Rushmore Civic Center, and they came in and they shot pretty well in their first game at the Premier Center. So I do think that's going to be a big effect in this tournament.
Oh, and frankly, it's not just high school kids that struggle in environments like that. We saw the Summit League tournament. A lot of teams struggled to find it at different times for whatever the reason is. Certainly the venue could have played a role in that, but I guess, you know, it's just a matter of determination going forward. As you try to focus in 3 days, you got to string 3 wins together. Who do you think has the best chance of doing that?
Well, it would be hard for me to believe that somebody's going to upset either Lincoln or Washington. We know they both can lose, but at this point, those 2 teams are the best 2 teams in this state tournament. You could see a team like Pierre or Rapid City Stevens, who have some high ceilings, you know, cause some havoc, but I just have a hard time believing it won't be Washington and Lincoln on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think it's going to be those 2 teams, and I think Washington's going to get Lincoln for the 3rd time. I think you know, Lincoln has played them tough, and you certainly have to give them credit for that. But Washington has answered the bell every time they've been challenged, aside those 2 out-of-state losses. But I think the Warriors are going to take home that state championship trophy on Saturday night. All right, we move to the other side of the state now. West River Class A tournament out at the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center. Aberdeen Roncalli comes in as the #1 seed. They will open up at 12 Mountain Time against Lennox.
Aberdeen Roncalli, this is a team that has had a lot of high hopes over the last 5 years. A lot of good teams haven't been able to quite do it at the state tournament. This season, I think, might be a little bit different. They are structured perfectly for a tournament setting where they can do a lot of different things on offense. Braden McNary is leading the way, 18 points per game, 4 rebounds, but they've got so much depth. Zach Hamrick, Landon Hayline, Sam Reinen, Daniel Holmstrom, all guys that on any given night can put up a double-digit win. And although they struggled a little bit down the stretch, losing a game they didn't foresee losing to with Clark Willow Lake, a tough team, but I still think that they're the best team overall, and they proved that when they beat Dell Rapids at the Hanson Classic.
I know one matchup that you're really interested in this quarterfinal round is that 4-5 game between that Clark Willow Lake team that you just mentioned and Little Wound.
This is going to be a dynamic game. Clark Willow Lake really has 3 strong, thick players on the middle of their lineup. Tyson Jenkins, Noah Huber, and Rory Forrest. Not many teams can match up with those guys, but on the other hand, you've got Little Wound, who's got a 7-1 player in Nate Brownbull. This is a guy who just changes games. People do not want to go in the lane even close to him. He's averaging about 8 blocks per game. You know, even offensively, he definitely impacts the game, but defensively, it's going to be tough for Clark Willow Lake to go to their 3 bread-and-butter guys on the inside. The one thing Clark Willow Lake does have going for him is their point guard, Braxton Hartley, who's fully back from his ACL tear, and I think that it's going to be a game of guards, even though so many stars on the post for both Little Wound and for Clark Willow Lake.
As we move to the evening session in Class A for Thursday night, gets underway 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Winner is the #2 seed. They'll take on St. Thomas More. Now, that #7 is not a number that we're used to seeing associated with the Cavaliers. Traditionally, they are a 1, maybe a 2 at worst. But they've had, you know, some issues at different points this season.
They have.
Certainly proven capable, though. When they play their best, they are still one of the best teams in South Dakota Class A basketball.
We are not used to the 7 as a seed. We are not used to 9 in the loss column. But one thing that they do that most teams don't in this class is they play 5 games against AA opponents, and that gets them ready for March. And right now, I think they're sophomores. Two of the best players that they have are sophomores. That's Jacob Satter and Isaac Kortmeyer. And Kortmeyer's a 6'8" guy on the inside. He's not playing like a sophomore anymore. This is a guy who can go off offensively or defensively. And then we saw some injuries earlier this year to guys like Adam Baker. And now that they've got Adam Baker and Isaac Kortmeyer, 2 6'8" guys on the inside, PJ Friedel is hitting the shot. Matthew Eastmo's great. And then they got Lincoln Feist coming off the bench. It's hard to call these guys an underdog at the 7 seed, especially playing against Winter, who hasn't seen nearly the same competition. Winter, on the other hand, we talked about, you know, St. Thomas More playing so many AA teams. Winter's played a lot of Class B teams, so the competition level is going to be a little different in this game. Although, give Winter credit. They've got a guy named Brandon Harder who's almost a 20-point scorer a game, and they've played some really good ball this year.
They are 21-1 on the year, whereas St. Thomas More, despite the tough schedule, they do have those 9 losses, as you said, 13-9. Coming into the state tournament, which is why they ended up as the #7 seed. The final quarterfinal matchup, Dell Rapids spent a lot of time up at that #1 spot in the Class A poll this year. They open up against Mount Vernon Plankington.
This is a team that's got some very talented offensive players, and they love to get out and run in transition, and they've got that leader, Ty Hoagland, who's about a 20-point-per-game scorer. I think this is a very dangerous team, maybe the most talent at the top of this roster than anybody has. Only 2 losses this year, stumbled against Vermilion, stumbled against Aberdeen Roncalli. You play that game again, though, and we might get to play that game again. It could go a lot of different ways.
All right, 3 days. Everybody's looking for 3 wins. I know you're really high on Roncalli. You think this is a team that maybe has all the pieces in place to complete what they've not been able to complete. Is that your champ? Do you think that's who's going to be hoisting the hardware on Saturday?
You get a feeling that I get a feeling at least that Dell Rapids has the right mix, and I think that they have a little higher ceiling with the guys like Ty Hoagland who can take over the game. I think it's going to be Roncalli and Dell Rapids. You're going to see Ty Hoagland go against Braden McNary, 2 of the best players in the state, and I think it's going to be one of those matches in the fourth quarter, back and forth, their big guy against their big guy. We'll see who has the most shots, but I think the Couriers might.
I'm going to go a little farther out on the limb than you. And I'm going to pick St. Thomas more. I love the fact that that they do play that tough schedule, and that's a credit to Coach Hollenbach and his staff. They always put these guys in place. They play higher level competition to get better on an individual standpoint, but also so that they're ready for this state tournament type
4 titles
setting.
In the last 6 years.
It's hard to argue, and the fact that they're playing it in Rapid City, I really like that way the way things shake out for them. They are going to have a tough test if they get past a winner team that's very good. To win 2 games in a row against Winter and Dell Rapids will battle test them certainly for whoever they might face if they get to the final. But I like St. Thomas.
They've won 9 in a row at this point. It's not like they're waiting to peak. They're peaking right now.
So it's going to be a great tournament out in Rapid City. That Class A boys tournament traditionally is one of the more competitive ones and usually a lot of fun to watch. There's been some really good parity in Class A here over the last few years.
I'm looking forward to all these tournaments.
It's going to be great.
One of them, the Bees as
well.
The
Bees is always fun as well because of the history, the tradition of this tournament up in Aberdeen. It's such a huge event up at Walks Arena at the Barnett Center on the campus of Northern State University.
And there's not a single team you can point to this year that looks head and shoulders above everybody. That those top 4 seeds are very close, and I feel bad for Wolsey Wessington because I think they've been the team to beat.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one thing I wanted to address is that the number 1 seed, Faith, 22-1. It's hard to argue with what they've done.
It is.
But Wolsey Wessington, undefeated, 23-0, ends up as the number 4 team. And I know this is all based on seed points. And, they've got a formula for this. And according to the formula, that's how it shakes out. But just a tough draw for Wolsey Wessington.
Because they're the 4 seed and Faith is the 1 seed, I think they could be interchanged. And so if they both win their first round games, I mean, it doesn't matter. Throw those out. It could be Wolsey Wessington number 1 and Faith number 4. Not a big deal. But the problem is that Wolsey Wessington has a tough first-round game against Hanson, a team that is just a 4-loss team on the year that features a lot of seniors who are peaking at the right time, including Jordan Marquardt, who leads the team in scoring, assists, 3-pointers, almost a 20-point-per-game guy, 19 points per game guy, with Taylor Nichols, a 17-point-per-game guy. This team could erupt, and that could be a trap in that first-round game.
Well, and then you look at the bottom half of the bracket, White River doing what White River does. They're the number 2 seed coming into the state tournament. Eldon Marshall has these guys playing well each and every year. They are one of the best, if not the best teams in Class B, and they're back at it here at the state tournament once again. I know this isn't a team quite maybe to the magnitude that we've gotten used to seeing out of White River, although it's hard to make that case when they're 21-2 coming in.
It is, but those 2 losses, one to St. Francis Indian, one to Sanborn Central Woonsocket, 2 good teams, but teams that in the past some of these really good White River teams would blow right past. So I didn't see a lot of quality wins when I looked at the White River schedule. I don't think they're at that same level, although they do have some outstanding seniors in Justin Prue, who's great job shooting the ball. And they got a 6'9" guy on the post, Justin Folkers, who's healthy. He hasn't been healthy in some of the last couple state tournaments. So they could cause some havoc. I just don't see that, though. I think they got a tough first-round battle in this Parker matchup. A lot of times we hear about some of the new players who kind of pop up on the scene at the state tournament time. I think one of those players is going to be Zach O'Keefe, a guy that scores 19 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 3.5 steals per game. He takes games over, and they play 4 guards on the perimeter and let their airwalker, Zach Anderson, find seams to the basket or back cuts where he'll flush 2 or 3 dunks down per game. And they're going to be a fun team to watch. So check out Parker versus White River, that first round game.
And of course, Langford, a team that has played well all season long, they're going to open up their tournament run against Gregory in the nightcap on Thursday night. Bo Freeze, certainly one of the best players individually in Class B basketball.
The future Northern State recruit is all he's cracked up to be. And the fun thing about him is you can put him on a 5'10" guard. You can put him, that's what Paul Rosh told me, is that he's a defensive nightmare because he can match up on your biggest post guy or on your point guard and take care of business. And he's got that tournament experience that not a lot of players in this field have.
We've talked about just how wide open this thing appears to be, just how close the 1 through 4 really is. I mean, I know you've been super high on Woolsey Wessington all year. Is that the team? Is that the one you got pegged?
I think they get it done. Yeah, I think they do. I think a lot of people had them even outside their top 5. It took them a couple months to even get them in the top 5. I've pretty much had them at 1 or 2 the whole season, and that's because Lorenzo Williams is by far the best player in this class. And what he's done to not only take it to the hole for the last 12 months, he's able to shoot that jump shot now. And 25 points per game. I mean, he can single-handedly beat teams, and I think he's going to single-handedly beat some teams on the way to a championship.
You know, you have been preaching that all season, just how good this Woolsey Washington team is with Lorenzo Williams kind of running the show for them, and your message is taken with me. I've got no arguments at all. And that's not always the case.
No,
I mean, I like to argue for the sake of argument, but this one
not another team that's quite
not really. And I don't think Faith. Well, I certainly credit them for the season that they've had. They've had a great run here. If that's your top team, at least as your seed, something's wrong because Woolsey Wessington, had just kind of rolled.
Yeah.
And to come in as the number 4 seed, that's tough for them. And if they get past that Hanson matchup, and that is a tough first-round matchup for them.
Top teams in this.
It should be a very, very good basketball game, certainly. If they get past that one, I don't see a tougher game for them. And so I think they handle the next 2 relatively easily, and they do end up winning that state title. Mm-hmm. So bottom line, it's going to be a fun weekend in the state of South Dakota, both in the 3 largest cities in this state for state boys basketball. The AA's at the Denny Sanford Premier Center in Sioux Falls, the A's at the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center in Rapid City, and of course the B's again at Walks Arena at the Barnett Center on the campus of Northern State in Aberdeen. And we certainly look forward to covering all those events for you. Remember to tune in next Wednesday night. We're going to recap all that action for you on another episode of Varsity Sports. So for Jason Andera, I'm Jay Elson. Thanks for watching.